And then, in 1971, Boleskine House gained its second most famous owner. Jimmy Page, legendary guitarist and producer of Led Zeppelin, one of the biggest rock bands in history, and an avid collector of Aleister Crowley memorabilia. Page had read extensively about Crowley and was fascinated by his ideas and his connection to Thelma, Crowley's religious philosophy. When Boleskine House came on the market in 1971, Page purchased it. The house was in a terrible condition. Page felt it would be a good atmosphere in which to write songs. He arranged for restoration work and had ambitious plans to remodel the house with a Crowley-like theme. He commissioned an artist named Charles Pace to paint Crowley-esque murals on the walls, based on the murals discovered in Crowley's Abbey of Thelma in Sicily by filmmaker Kenneth Anger in 1955. But here's the interesting thing. Despite his clear obsession with the property, Jimmy Page spent very little time at the Boleskine House. Instead, he asked trusted friends to occupy and watch over the property for him. The most notable caretaker was Malcolm Dent, who lived there from the early 1970s until Page sold the property in 1992. When asked why Page had chosen him, Dent said, "Jimmy Page caught me at a time in my life when I wasn't doing a great deal and asked me to come up and run the place. I never did establish why he fixed on me." When Dent moved in, he found the house in terrible condition. It was a wreck, he recalled. It had been more or less abandoned. There had been at least one fire there. Parts of the building were missing, and it had been badly patched up. The grounds, which at one time had been very nicely laid out, were gone to hell. And Dent experienced the strangeness firsthand. He reported unexplained creaks and groans, various ghostly apparitions. He became annoyed by the constant stream of Crowley and Page fans who attempted to trespass on the property for a look around. About the atmosphere of the house, Dent said, whatever was there was pure evil. Another friend who stayed at Boleskine awoke one night claiming she had been attacked by some kind of devil. Other documented occurrences include chairs switching places on their own, doors slamming open and closed for no reason, and carpets and rugs rolling up inexplicably. Despite all this, Dent raised his family at Boleskine. He met his wife there. When strange things happen, he would simply shrug and say, "That's just Aleister doing his thing." In a 1975 interview of Rolling Stone, Jimmy Page was asked if the house was haunted. His response? There were definitely presences there. The bad vibes were already there. A man was beheaded there, and sometimes you can hear his head rolling down. He was likely referring to Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, whose execution was connected to the Fraser family history with the property. Whether Page actually heard these sounds or was engaged in rockstar myth-making, we'll never know. Boleskine House appeared in Led Zeppelin's documentary The Song Remains the Same, which followed the band on their 1973 US tour. The house was put on the market for £250,000 in 1991. Page sold it to Ronald and Annette Machiavelli in 1992. Ronald and Annette brought a different energy to Boleskine House. They had kinship ties to the Fraser clan, and Ronald sought to re-establish Boleskine as a Fraser estate once more. People who visited during this time remember gatherings in the gardens of Boleskine with traditional bagpipes playing for merry parties. For over a decade, the house enjoyed what might have been its most peaceful period in a century. The Machiavellis dismissed notions of hauntings or witchcraft. It was simply their home. But Ronald eventually passed away. After his death, Annette sold Boleskine in 2002. The buyers were Tinnis Griffonian and Gertrude Johanna Bakker, a couple from the Netherlands. They used Boleskine as a holiday home, a retreat from their life in Holland. For 13 years, the house stood relatively quietly on its hillside above Loch Ness. And then came December 23rd, 2015. At approximately 1:40 p.m. on December the 23rd, 2015, a motorist on the A82 road reported flames and smoke coming from Boleskine House. When fire crews arrived, an estimated 60% of the building had already been incinerated. Flames were rising 20 feet high. Firefighters concentrated on the west wing, as the rest of the building was already severely damaged. The owner's business partner and daughter had gone Christmas shopping in Inverness. They returned to find their holiday home ablaze. The fire was thought to have started in the kitchen. Nobody was in the house at the time, and there were no casualties. But the damage was catastrophic. The interior was almost totally destroyed. Part of the roof and the outer walls survived, but it was essentially a shell. According to a 2025 report obtained under Freedom of Information legislation, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service listed the main cause as overheating, unknown cause. The incident was logged as accidental, though the exact cause was never definitively determined. A former owner stated that given the extent of the damage, it is unlikely it will ever be rebuilt unless there is someone out there with an interest in the occult wanting to spend a lot of money. For 3.5 years, Boleskine House sat as a ruin. It became a magnet for trespassers, people wanting a thrill, visiting the spooky haunted house on the hill. Vandalism became a problem. In April 2019, the property was put on the market. The land was divided into lots. In July 2019, it was purchased by Keith and Kyra Reddy, along with William Clifford Banks. They established the Boleskine House Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to restoring the property and opening it to the public. Just 5 days after completing the purchase, on July 31st, 2019, the night of a black moon, disaster struck again. Around 3:45 p.m., fires broke out in 2 separate locations on the property, inside the derelict main house and in the coach house. This time, there was no question about the cause. Detective Inspector Eddie Ross stated, "Our inquiries are at an early stage, although our initial assessment is that this fire was started deliberately." 2 arrests were made on suspicion of arson, though no one was ever charged due to insufficient evidence. The coach house was saved, but what remained of Boleskine House's roof caved in. The remainder of the interior was completely destroyed. The Boleskine House Foundation released a statement. "It is with great sadness that we report that the remainder of the building's interior has now been destroyed, and along with it, important historical clues to the features of this important piece of Scottish heritage." The house was uninsured due to the previous fire damage. The foundation launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise money for restoration. In December 2019, work began to clear the fire-damaged material and prepare the building for restoration. Since 2020, despite ongoing construction, members of the public have been able to visit Boleskine House through pre-arranged tours. The foundation has been praised for their efforts. In 2024, Boleskine House earned TripAdvisor's Traveller's Choice Award for 2 consecutive years. Traditional building techniques and materials are being used to preserve the house's historic integrity. The restoration focuses on redesigning the interior to reimagine the Jacobean, Georgian and Victorian periods with a traditional drawing room, dining room and library. The final cost is expected to be between £1.2 million and £1.5 million.